let's preview this tournament. Let's say who we think we see winning each one of these groups. And then from there, instead of doing like knockout stage, like predictions, let's just say who we see in the semis and the finals and who we see competing ultimately for the title of the Gold Cup trophy. The first group is Group A with Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, the USA, and then an undecided fourth opponent as well. That's going to be figured out in the build-up to this tournament. For now, it's Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, USA. The USA, who is the CONCACAF Nations League defending champion and is bringing what I would consider a B, maybe even C level type of roster to this tournament. Jamaica is bringing out their heavy hitters, and Trinidad and Tobago is going to try their absolute best to be a force in this tourney, man. I want to know right off the bat, 2 can qualify out of this 4-team group. Who do you have coming out and in which place?
Jamaica low-key might have the best squad on paper going into this tournament out of all the teams participating, which is insane to say, but also kind of makes sense given what Jamaica has been trying to build for the last, 6 years, essentially. My biggest take with Jamaica, my biggest problem, too, is that there is their consistency in squad selection. I made this take a couple months ago. I don't know why it got brought up, but Jamaica's biggest problem has been getting Michael Antonio to play for them every international break. It's hard. For some reason, it has been difficult for the Jamaican Federation to consistently get their best talent who mainly play in the Premier League to be convinced to represent Jamaica against all competition, against teams like Trinidad and Tobago or against teams like the United States. Pretty much every cycle, man, they'll start off with their big A team, but after 4 or 5 games, if it doesn't look good, they just send them all home and they just use a mainly domestic team or a heavily MLS-based side. And for me, it's so frustrating to see because where's the consistency in team chemistry? There is no way to build it. But one thing that I said that I think would change that was the appointment of Hallgrimsson, the former Icelandic coach who was just appointed as head coach of Jamaica, I think, maybe almost a year ago now. I think with his credibility, I think he's going to be able to consistently convince the best Jamaican talent to represent Jamaica every single international window. But low-key, bro, I was scared that it wasn't even going to happen this Gold Cup because their 2 friendlies that they just had, it was just their B team. And I was like, oh, fuck, there it is again. I was like, even with Hallgrimsson, they're not going to be able to get Antonio or Leon Bailey. But thankfully, their squad just got listed today, and it's their entire A team. When you look at their front 3, man, we've got Michael Antonio, we've got Leon Bailey on the right, and possibly making his debut, Damari Gray out on the other opposite wing. And then right underneath that, you have one of the best utility players in the Premier League representing Fulham, Bobby De Cordova-Reid. Come on, man. Come on, man. That's a good front 4.
Ethan Pinnock.
Brentford at the back.
Andre Blake, one of the best goalkeepers in MLS.
Absolutely.
Bro, at their highest peak, this is a Premier League level team, man. It really in terms of the talent that they have, some players in the championship as well, others in the MLS and others elsewhere. Jamaican me excited, bro. This team might be on a trajectory unlike any other Jamaican squad we've ever seen, bro. And it's funny because it's Jamaica, man. Like you said, their inability to consistently have a good squad in these tournaments, it must be so frustrating to be a Jamaican fan because you know what you have. You know what you're capable of, but last qualifying cycle, I thought was one of the worst ones I've seen from Jamaica. The fact they were even in the top 6 was frustrating because this team was abysmal, bro. So bad. Terrible. It's an easy dub every time any team in the top 3 played up against them. But now it's a fresh start, man. It's something new. And when you think about the USA, Mexico, and Canada not having to go through qualifiers to get to the World Cup, Jamaica might be finally taking this tournament, these moments seriously. Exactly. And I agree, bro. I see a Jamaican team here that could possibly, if they get hot, top the group. Because we're talking about a USA's team that isn't bringing their best players and that's playing essentially a B team. Jamaica's got a great squad. And if they can figure out that chemistry, if they can figure out how to play with each other right off the bat, this could be a really good team, man.
Absolutely. My only concern going into the tournament and actually throughout the duration of the tournament will be the team's overall chemistry because just realistically, they haven't really played together. Yes, they've all represented Jamaica at a certain point, but together all out at the same time, not really. Leon Bailey plays for Jamaica like once a year, bro. Yeah. It's just there's no consistency to it. But if they can use this tournament to kind of prove to themselves that, hey, we got talent on this team, we can play well together, and as you said, if they can make a deep run, then they got to go all in on this squad. Yeah. They got to go all in, use what they have, and qualify for 2026, which is going to be right next door. You know, Jamaica's our neighbors here, so this is the perfect opportunity for Jamaica to make a big statement, and I'm really glad, man. I'm really glad that they have a good coach behind them and hopefully the consistency in their squad selection. So just in general, I actually do have Jamaica topping this group.
You got them topping it?
I have them topping it.
I'm still going to go USA on this one.
It's I'm going
USA 1 and then Jamaica 2. Despite how critical we already shown to be about the USA squad, they're still pretty good, man. They're still pretty good, like in what the options that they have. I think where it gets shaky is up front. They're bringing in guys like Jesus Ferreira, Cade Cowell, players that played in the U20 World Cup, but ultimately fell short to Uruguay. The team, I believe from what I saw, defensively in the midfield was really solid. It's up front where I see the most concern.
Yeah.
But thus, I still think it's really good talent. They play that match against Jamaica at home. I can just see the USA figuring it out, having a little bit more, like you said, chemistry and connection with each other that ultimately ends up getting the victory in that situation. And so I'm going to bet on the USA topping the group, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jamaica tops it as well.
Yeah, no, I see the USA as a title contender still, even though they're bringing their B- team. As you kind of said, there's a lot of players making an appearance for this USA squad that is more of just like a future trend, mainly prospective players that could possibly represent the U.S. couple years down the line. For example, 19-year-old Cade Cowell, who's been a really big proponent for the San Jose Earthquakes for the last 3 years now. Can he be a really good U.S. men's national team player? Well, this is the perfect time to play him, you know, when there's no pressure for the USA, and this whole tournament for the United States is just an experiment. It's just to see, all right, we're going to get our best MLS players. We're going to get some of our 18 players, Matt Turner, Miles Robinson, who haven't played in a while due to either injury or just club situation. We're going to give them minutes. And then we're going to bring, again, just really young players like Gabriel Slonina, right? Maybe he plays like against Trinidad and Tobago, for example, right? So this whole thing is just an experiment for the United States. I'm very excited to see what they can do, given that they won it 2 years ago with essentially the same idea of the squad. So yeah, I see the USA as a good team in this tournament. Probably will make a semifinals appearance, honestly. But yeah, if Jamaica is as good as they are on paper, I think the USA will struggle to beat them. Although defensively and in the midfield, Jamaica's not going to have a lot of space. So maybe that game might end up in a draw, perhaps, unless Jamaica just figure it out immediately. But yeah, I have Jamaica, USA. Trinidad and Tobago just got invited to this tournament since Nicaragua got eliminated. They got discarded due to fielding an ineligible player. So that definitely doesn't help Nicaragua as far as their chances to try and build something towards qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. Trinidad and Tobago, honestly, though, kind of fun. Why not? Like
I'm saying, bro, they not dominated. They were a big component of CONCACAF in the 2000s. I remember those hexagonals. They were so involved. At one point, at their peak, they were the third, fourth best team in CONCACAF, and then the 2010s arrived, and that might as well have been like the fucking plague for them in a soccer sense, bro. This team eliminated themselves from CONCACAF so many times, did not provide any sort of level of competition in the 2010s in modern football. But then you get the gift from the CONCACAF gods when you came in second in your Nations League group to be summoned upon and called upon to be in the Gold Cup tournament. Are they just going to be happy to be here, or will they actually compete and prove to be a little bit of trouble against these teams?
Yeah, I actually see this team as being decent. Obviously, I don't see them as being able to compete against Jamaica and USA realistically, but they just finished right behind Nicaragua in their group. You can effectively see them as very similar to Nicaragua's caliber as far as skill is concerned. So I think Trinidad and Tobago will, put up as much as they can, but ultimately will fall short.
Okay, so Jamaica and the USA, we both agree. Maybe not in order, but ultimately they both get out of this group. Yeah. Group B has Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, and Qatar.
This is a really interesting group, man.
Yep.
I'll start off with the teams you just listed in order. Let's start with Haiti. a large contingent of the players that they've been calling up for the last like 6 years. We've got Johnny Placide, we have Steven Sabah, Donald Guerrier, Dawkins Nasson, and then there's a large contingent of MLS players as usual. Derek Etienne getting called up once again. So this team has been playing with each other for a long time, and at their best, man, Haiti's pretty competitive.
They've been involved in this tournament,
exactly.
Man. They've been trying to do something, bro.
Absolutely. So I don't see this team as any sort of like weak opponent, even if you're a team like Mexico. This is going to be a battle for sure. Like, this is not going to be an easy team. When you look at a team like Honduras frustrate me, man, because they're kind of actually in a similar situation to Mexico. Realistically, they've tried a number of coaches. They ended up going with Diego Vasquez, who coached Motagua for a decade. So coached in Honduras for 10 years straight. Honduras reached their lowest point after Fabian Coito just failed with them. So they're like, all right, we just need a domestic guy who knows Hondurans as best as any other coach. So we're going to get Vasquez to lead the helm for Honduras. But when you look at their squad, man, there's just not a lot to really go off of. I think up top, you have guys like Albert Ellis, for example, but then you're missing guys like Kyoto and El Choco Lozano this Gold Cup. So I think that's going to be a really big miss. And I think even more so, their midfield stretched, man. Alex Lopez, he's just not really at that international level, playing down in Costa Rica. And there's just more Central American talent. Honduras are good, but only within their realm, right? If they were playing against other Central American teams, I think it's going to be a close game every time, and maybe even more so, that they probably win a majority of the time. But when you pit them against a really talented team like Haiti or Qatar, Mexico, I see this Honduran team as very, very weak.
Yeah, I looked at their Gold Cup roster. I think 7-8 players are from Olympia, dude.
Yeah.
Like, they just have to rely on the best talent they have in their domestic league to form any sort of hope. And I get frustrated when it comes to Honduras because, similar to Trinidad and Tobago, so prominent in CONCACAF for so many years. And it seemed like they were on some sort of trajectory for a good while, just showing up to what I believe was the 2010 World Cup, no? And even, I think they might have won a game. Or they're actually part of that tournament. If you're an Honduran fan, think about how frustrated Mexico fans are right now. You know, we're seeing 2026 as a missed opportunity, as I said earlier. Honduras is missing out on a golden egg of an opportunity, bro. With 3 teams already qualified, this is your chance. The Honduras that I knew as a kid would be topping this CONCACAF qualifying cycle. But right now, we're talking about them as if they're not even favorites to get out of this group, bro. Which is truly sad because Honduras, at their peak, have such an incredible fan base. They have talent across their team. I don't know what it comes down to, whether it's the federation, their ability to develop talent, or like Mexico, they just don't have good players right now. Yeah. Ultimately, Honduras just doesn't give me the excitement that even a team like El Salvador gives me, man. I don't know, man. I don't know if I can pick them as getting out of this group.
I can't either, man. I mean, you talk about legends of the game for Honduras, you know, Bonilla Garcia, Minor Figueroa. Oof. Jerry Bankston in his prime, because he's like 36 now. I think still representing them, by the way. He's at this tournament, but in his prime, 26 to 30-year-old Jerry Bankston, he was a handful to deal with, a true threat. You just don't really have that right now for Honduras. And I remember there's a really good like fullback who played for Necaxa too. Like, you don't have that either. You're really just relying on domestic players to kind of get it done. Now, do you have the right guy to lead these domestic players? Absolutely. I mean, Vasquez literally is domestic. He comes from the system. But can it compete against international opponents? For me, the answer is no. So that's my take on Honduras. I just don't see them getting out of this group at all. Whereas Haiti, I think they have a good chance.
So?
I do think so. I'm going to leave Mexico for last. I'm going to move on to Qatar. So they're actually bringing like a B+, A- team. A couple of starters aren't coming. Abdel Karim Hassan's not coming. Boulem Kuki, no go. Akram Afif is not coming either. I know, for real. Hassan
What the hell is he doing, bro?
I don't know. I think they're just giving him a rest.
Oh,
yeah,
come on,
I think they're giving him a rest. Hassan Al-Haidos, their captain's also not coming. Right, so this Qatar team is not their best.
Damn.
So it just is what it is. But the rest of their team start at the World Cup. So you could consider like probably 5 of the players that start played in the World Cup. The other 6 will be completely new faces.
New coach
as well, which I actually think is the biggest point here, because getting a guy like Carlos Queiroz, I think is a brilliant move for Qatar, man. I think it's brilliant because why not get a guy who's so used to the region, not just all of Asia, but just that kind of Middle Eastern region in general. Why not get a guy who just knows it?
Yeah.
Who's just so good at it, not just in AFC competitions, but in the World Cup, man. I mean, all of the appearances Iran have made have been under Queiroz in the last 10 years. So get a guy who's just so experienced, knows how to deal with these big game situations. I think it's a good signing after a guy like Felix Sanchez led them to the World Cup.
Yeah, I think the signing of Carlos Queiroz is such a, in a good way, such a predictable signing.
It is,
like,
though.
Felix Sanchez leaves, Qatar just looks down the list. Queiroz is, based off of his resume, it makes 100% of like sense, bro.
It does.
Queiroz is leading the Qatari nation to another Gold Cup appearance. And why not, man? He has the experience. He has the caliber. He knows teams of this level, of this quality. And truly, I mean, I do think he's figured out ways at his peak to maximize the squads that he's been given. And so why not, man? Why not? Give him a shot and see if he can do something and stir something up at the Gold Cup here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Mexico.
And then Mexico, brother.
They're fielding their A team.
Yep.
The same team that went to the Nations League finals against the USA and I guess against Panama is the same team that will be playing in this Gold Cup. They're title contenders. When you look at it in general, despite what's been going on, despite their abysmal performances out on the pitch, this team still is good when you compare them against Caribbean and Central American talent.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think, thank God, that the one truth that continues to be persistent with Mexico is that, yeah, we're asked against the top teams, USA and Canada. But in qualifying, even in Nations League, we showed it. If there's a team of lesser quality against us, we still manage to beat them.
Exactly. So I have
Mexico. I'm not proud of that, but like it's like, you know, like that still remains true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that hasn't changed. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I think the only thing we can really expect from Mexico, and we probably have already kind of mentioned it, is can they just come together? Can this team kind of look at each other and be like, all right, we've got a maybe possibly more tactical coach in Lozano. Can he field us the right way? But beyond that, can we show a little passion? Yep. Can we try to get fans to actually come into the stadium, enjoy our style of football, and watch us win a couple of games? That's, for me, the biggest question for Mexico in this Gold Cup. And even then, like, Mexico, it sounds negative, but even then, Mexico making like a semifinals appearance, I'm not going to get hyped off of it. Simply because I know that the USA is not fielding their best squad, Canada's not fielding their best squad, and those two teams right now have Mexico's number, in my opinion. So if Mexico can't beat their demons, for me it's not an overall win. It's more of just like a positive step, if you will.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for Mexico is they play attractive football in this tournament under a new head coach, and maybe they face off against a Canadian side or maybe a U.S. side, and they get the victory playing healthy football. Yeah. I think that's the best that you can hope for. Yeah. Will it mean anything in the grand scheme of the standings of CONCACAF? I don't think so. But at the very least, it might change the perception. It might change our attitude towards Mexico in these next few months or maybe even years. And it might be the step we need to take in order to just build something positive for once, man, following the terrible tenures of Tata and Diego Coca.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you're right. So there is a lot of positivity Mexico can get out of this Gold Cup. Just when I really think about it and I sit back and I look at where I want Mexico to be, even a Gold Cup win this year won't really mean much unless they beat like Jamaica if they're playing really well in a final or a USA squad, for example.
You know what's so kind of frustrating for me is think about a team like Germany, for example. Germany had an abysmal World Cup appearance. People in Germany were criticizing the squad, rightfully so, for not getting out of the group. But then what do they have to do to kind of gain back that confidence? Well, they got to compete in a very competitive Nations League tournament where you have top European sides. And if you don't succeed there, then you got to look towards the Euros. And you got to earn your fans back.
Oh, my God.
Through one of the most grueling tournaments in the world.
Yeah.
But Mexico, man, we're gifted a Gold Cup where the top teams aren't even fielding their best players. And we're almost getting away with it in a sense, like with that idea of like, yeah, we might gain back some of that public perception that has been so negative towards Mexico by winning the Gold Cup, but it almost feels like an easy way out after everything we've done, man. I'm turning, bro. I'm turning. I'm low-key hoping Mexico doesn't make it out of this fucking group, bro.
Yeah. Really open the eyes of the Mexican people.
Like if we're gonna suffer, let's suffer fully, man. Let's reconstruct ourselves. But a part of me still wants to win this goddamn tournament, man. If we're given an opportunity, fuck the USA. If they don't want to put out the best squad, fuck it, man. Canada, if they don't want to put out their best squad, fuck them too. I want some silverware, bro. And if we can still continue to do that, then it's low-key on the USA and Canada for not putting out their best players, when in all honesty, I would have preferred if they did, man.
But can I talk about that very quickly? The idea that the USA are not taking their A squad? Yeah. I actually like it. Mainly because, first point, we won it without our A squad 2 years ago. So we already have proof that the idea of experimenting works. You know, we don't have to field our A team and we can still win it because we beat it against Mexico's A team, which is the same thing that's happening this year. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm okay with it. The second reason is I think this actually builds a really healthy relationship for the players and their European clubs. Give the players a full offseason. Given that it's so short, I think that's very beneficial. And secondly, don't let the clubs worry about a player getting injured over a Gold Cup, right? Why not ask the clubs, hey, we're going to need them for the Copa America? Especially since all of America's players mainly play in Europe. I think establishing that really good relationship, having the players have a full preseason with their European clubs is only going to make our A team better. So that's why I really enjoy the idea of the USA not feeling their A team. Now, I know your take is the idea that why not continue the dominance, right? But I don't think it's necessary because we have already won it without it. The USA very well could go on and win it again.
They could. No, they could. They still have the talent and skill to compete in this tournament, so I do like that. My problem is in CONCACAF specifically, I think when you're the best team in that region, you have a responsibility, especially if you have the talent and caliber to demonstrate it, to dominate the region, bro. Especially when you're a USA squad that had to play the role of little brother for decades, bro. Why isn't the USA taking this more personally? I understand the benefits that come from not feeling their A team and sending the guys back to Europe and improving it on an individual level, but I would actually argue that you can do both. I think that the USA could field their A team in the Gold Cup, and instead of fielding their B team and giving these guys 90 minutes to really play themselves out, why not field your A team, but then bring on those youngsters? Bring on a Cade Cowell for the last 30 minutes of the game instead of Ricardo Pepi. Maybe give Gaga Slonina a start for a couple games instead of Matt Turner. Instead of Matt Turner. That way you can still field your best squad, but then you kind of fiddle with the roster a little bit. Because to me, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I think it's so important for the USA to continue their chemistry. I think it's very important for them to continue building what they already have. By fielding a younger, inexperienced squad, yes, you get to kind of see what players are kind of developing at that level, but I feel like the USA already has a pretty defined starting 11. And I feel like doing this is a little bit of a waste of time. If you had questions about who's getting that center back position, who's starting at fullback, then maybe it makes sense. But for me, it's pretty straightforward. And I just think that playing in a tournament, a competitive tournament, is just as, if not better, than training in Europe right now during the offseason. I think the players that are going to Europe to train and just develop themselves over the summer would gain just as much of a benefit playing in a competitive setting while also developing chemistry with the national team. But I get the idea. We know they're the best. There's nothing to prove. But from a fan perspective, you want to see your team showcase their dominance. And knowing how important that Mexican-American rivalry is, I'm surprised the USA wouldn't go full throttle towards really digging the knife deeper into Mexico and Canada's back of just showcasing why they're the best team in CONCACAF while also being able to develop their players and their chemistry.
I completely get what you're saying, though I do disagree as far as what you value. I do value a player's individual relationship with their European club over playing against Trinidad and Tobago, for example, or Puerto Rico if it ends up being that, right? I just value it differently. Although I completely get what you're saying, because there is no wrong in getting USA's A team mixing in with B team players for a course of a tournament. There's no wrong in it. I actually have a different solution to this, and it's one that I wish was in place regardless of the USA's decision. I wish the Gold Cup was once every 4 years.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it's every other year dilutes its importance, right? It's that age-old idea of, oh, what if the World Cup was every 2 years? Well, there's a big problem with that, and it's obvious. It would dilute its importance. And I think the Gold Cup being every 2 years, it's just too much of a commitment to decide, oh, do we bring our A team or do we bring our B team? Or should we do it right after the World Cup or should we bring our A team right before the World Cup? And it just gets even trickier when we're hosting it and we have a Copa America right in the middle. If you really think about it, we would play an international competitive tournament every single year in the summer, starting with 2022. 2023 Gold Cup, 2024 Copa America, 2025 Gold Cup, and then finally the 2026 World Cup. So I'm fine with taking one summer off, and that's just what I value in this situation. But you're right. I agree with you. Sending a message, getting our best team out there would be dope to see, but I think it's on CONCACAF, honestly, for the frequency of Gold Cups that they host.
I have Mexico coming out in first.
As do I.
Mexico coming out in first. And then you know what? I'm going Honduras in second. I'm going Honduras in second only because Haiti and Qatar I don't see as big enough threats to challenge Honduras ultimately for that second spot. If you had even a Trinidad and Tobago in this group, maybe I'd give them that second slot. But I think Honduras will figure something out in the sense of coming in second in this group. Mexico tops it, and that is who I have coming out of Group B.
I have Mexico topping as well, but my second place team is actually Haiti.
Okay.
I have them edging out what I'm going to call a thin and confused Honduras and beating out a non-A team Qatar, who I think is just here to kind of get their reps in, kind of like the USA is, but I think there's just a disparity between USA talent and Qatari talent.
Group C has Costa Rica, El Salvador, Panama, and then an undecided fourth team so far. This, to me, might be the group of death, honestly. It's pure class. Pure CONCACAF class in this group at a certain level. To start off, Costa Rica, coming off of a disappointing end to their Nations League tenure, falling short to Panama in that final game, giving Panama access into the semifinals of the Nations League, but knowing that they were a part of the World Cup a few months back and playing a prominent role, damn near making it into the round of 16, but falling short. Costa Rica will be back at this tournament without Keylor Navas, their leader, their savior in the back, but still fielding a team that is full of players from Alajuelense, and then a team like Saprissa as well. They will be bringing in their Costa Rican talent to see if they can have an impact and maybe once, maybe just once, make a deep run to the final in this tournament, man.
For me, I see Costa Rica similar to Honduras, just maybe let's just say a level higher as far as talent is concerned. I think this team is a little thin. But maybe that's a good thing, because I think Costa Rica need to kind of start thinking about who their next generation of footballers is going to be. That was my take going into 2022. This was the swan song of all of their older players, namely Brian Ruiz, who were so good with them, for 10 years prior, right? When you look at this Costa Rican side now, you see, Brian Ruiz, no Keylor Navas, and that's for a different reason, but you kind of get the idea. No Yeltsin Tejeda, no Johan Venegas. They're all gone. No Gamboa, no Brian Oviedo.
Borges.
Borges actually is here,
wait,
surprisingly.
Really?
He's the only veteran left, realistically. Him and I would say Kendall Waston are the only two true veterans
Campbell,
left.
is he going?
It's crazy, but Campbell is barely 30.
What?
I know. He's got another, realistically, maybe 5 years.
Fuck?
Yeah,
is
bro.
he going though?
Yeah, he's there. Yeah, he's there.
Right,
So yeah. So yeah, as far as that's true. As far as people who have played for Costa Rica for a while, Campbell is still there, and he's a part of that kind of old head contingency for sure. But the rest of the team is, dude, brand new, and low key. I'm just more curious to see how they play together. Can they be as competitive as the Costa Rica that dominated Central America for the last 10 years? Because this is a new team, effectively, just mixing with a couple of old heads, which I think honestly is a good way to transition. Keep a couple of veterans who have immense experience. Francisco Calvo also at the back, I think, will be able to help with Kendall Waston to lead that back line. But dude, other than that, man, the rest of the team, going forward, out wide, and in those midfield pockets, brand new. Juison Bennett, the really young Costa Rican player, not at this tournament either. So there's a lot of new players here for Costa Rica, man. So this is going to be, in a way, a complete experiment for this Costa Rican side, this Gold Cup.
Paired up in this group with El Salvador, who will be a big part of qualifying for the World Cup in these next few years. El Salvador is interesting, man. They really interest me because if you look at their Nations League group, they were paired up with the United States. And when you look at the results, they got, I believe, a 1-1 tie against the USA at home. Oh, yeah. And then they only lost 1-0 away from home. They've been able to play the best team in CONCACAF pretty well so far. But then you see them play against like Grenada, for example, in that same group, and tie or lose and fall short against a team that they should be beating. So this team is kind of bipolar in that sense, man. Yeah. They can play up to the level of some of the best teams in CONCACAF, but then other times just not show any sort of quality or ability to win out and see out a game. So El Salvador is being put in a very interesting group here with Costa Rica and Panama, and I'm just interested to see if those El Salvadorian fans can come out, can really bring that energy out of this team and compete in this tournament, because I still hold that El Salvador at their best can make a very viable run in this tournament. But if they go back to the old ways of just inconsistency, this team might struggle to make it out of the group.
Yeah, I basically have the exact same take, although mine might be a bit more negative, and let me explain why. I think El Salvador have kind of maximized what they've had. I really do think so. I think their last World Cup qualification was the best El Salvador could have done. And I really thought about it, because you're right. They're able to get good results against the United States. None of them wins, but nonetheless, strong competitive results. The problem with El Salvador is essentially their entire offense. It's non-existent. They're able to go out wide, get good dribble penetration, maybe put in a couple of crosses, but at the end of the day, none of it ultimately results to anything consistent. They cannot score for the most part, especially when they're playing against teams that are better than them. They have the fight, and that's what I love about El Salvador is their midfield and the defense, they don't give up. They will fight as hard as they can. And again, they can compete against the likes of USA, Canada, and Mexico, but they can never beat them. And even then, can they really get a draw against them? Incredibly difficult for them. They have a lot of fight and a lot of heart, as I've said, but I just cannot see the Salvadorian side improving, because over the last 3 years, starting with the 2022 World Cup qualification, I haven't seen any improvements. It's the same, but it's a good consistency that they have, because they're nowhere near close to the bottom of CONCACAF. If anything, they really are closer to the top, but they cannot break into that, let's say Panama tier. They can't break into that Costa Rica tier. They're right underneath that. So if the USA, Canada, Mexico is tier 1, El Salvador unfortunately is tier 3 for me. And I thought in a moment that they could break into that second tier and truly compete against, the USA, Canada, and against Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica. But at the end of the day, man, I think El Salvador really do rely a lot on energy. I really do. If the World Cup was in El Salvador, I think it'd be a different story. I'd be saying a different thing. But the fact that you have to play on neutral ground, the fact that qualifications home and away, I just don't really have a lot of faith in the Salvadorian side to get consistent results. Talent-wise, their offense just isn't good enough. Now, can they get some good results in this Gold Cup? Absolutely. But can they get to like a semifinal? I'm going to say ultimately no. And then when I look at the teams that are in this group, I don't see El Salvador getting out of this group either.
The last team in this group is Panama, with the fourth place team still not being decided. Panama, my friend, I think is in a very interesting path because they just came off probably the most disappointing Nations League performance we've seen, falling short to Canada in the semifinal and then losing to Mexico in that third place game. Panama, we've seen since 2018, has slowly been on a decline, not being able to qualify into 2022, struggling to get back to their best ways. But it impressed me that when it came down to playing against Costa Rica in the Nations League, they were able to get a very important result. And funny enough, they've been paired up with them yet again for another run at it. And I think it's poetry because at the end of the day, those are the two teams I have getting out of this group, Costa Rica and Panama. And it's just a question of who comes out in first, who comes out in second. My prediction is that Costa Rica comes out in first and Panama will come out in second. But this Panamanian squad, I hope that they can bring out their best features and just be consistent, bro, because when it comes to fighting off against opponents of their level, they can play very, very well and they can match them head to head. But when it comes to a team that's just even slightly better than them, they fall short. They aren't able to get that result. It took results like that to be able to make it to 2018 in the World Cup, but since then, I haven't seen it, and because of that, I think I'm going to pit them in that number 2 spot against Costa Rica.
Panama frustrate me, man. I talked about the tiers of CONCACAF, El Salvador being in tier 3. I have Panama being at the top of tier 2. At their best, man, they're so close. They're so close to being able to truly get a result against a really good Canada side or possibly against a really good Mexican or USA side, right? But when push comes to shove, and this was my criticism of them before the Nations League, in big situations, they always, and I mean always, falter. But it's so frustrating because when I look at their squad, they have the most talented squad basically outside of the big 3, in my opinion. Jamaica might have a thing to say about that, but I want to wait till the Gold Cup's done to kind of initiate them as the 4th best team. But if we exclude Jamaica for now, I see Panama as the most talented side outside of those big 3. And I love the way their team's set up, man. There's a lot of good veteran presence. Even up top, you have guys like Alberto Quintero. In the midfield, you have Godoy. At the back, you have a guy who plays for Ander, like Michael Murillo. And then you also have a lot of dynamicism also in a lot of areas of the pitch. Adalberto Carrasquilla, just constantly being a presence, box-to-box midfielder for Panama. And then up top, you have guys like Ismael Diaz, Jose Luis Fajardo, players that are dynamic, that can go out wide and take players one-on-one. Now, their efficiency is generally low, but I love their work rate. I love their ideas. Joel Edgar Bárcenas, I love his style and the way that he approaches the game of football from an offensive perspective. There's so much to like from an individual point for Panama, man. They have some really fun players. It's about bringing it together. And that was my biggest point going to the Nations League finals was I really liked how they kept their coach, Thomas Christiansen. I think that's the biggest key to getting this team to play consistency. Because it's not about giving them that motivation. It's not about, do we have the talent as a Central American side? They have that. For me, it's about getting the tactics right and then just playing consistently. And having a coach employ the same tactics every international break, I think is the best way for this Panama side to see success. But I need to see in this Gold Cup, man. I need to see it. If I see Panama have a really shitty Gold Cup, then I'm done with them, man. I'm not going to give them any hope to qualify for this 2026 World Cup because they already failed me in 2022 with the same problems. So if they can't fix it now, after already having that 2022 World Cup qualification campaign, I can't trust them. I already can't trust them, but I'm giving them one last piece of hope because I do think that they have the talent. So much so that if they are fielding their best team, I have Panama topping the group, Costa Rica right behind them.
Yeah, I remember early days of the Give and Go. I remember our first video that got like 1,000 views was related to Panama.
Yeah,
Panama gave us the platform we have today. Because we labeled them.
I don't know about that.
We labeled them the Cinderella team of CONCACAF because in that moment of time of the video being released, they were that. They were the underdog. They were the team that was surprising us, the team that really caught everyone off guard. They were playing so well up to that point. They were in the top 3 of CONCACAF in terms of rankings. Since that video was released, they've succumbed to essentially what you just described.
Yes.
A team full of inconsistency, a team that has incredible individual talent but can't seem to put it together in major tournaments. I agree. I'm going to be just as critical of Panama as you are going to be based off of this tournament, but I'm hoping for something positive here. And so, like you said, ultimately, I have them getting out of the group. It'll be interesting to see what they do afterwards. The last group that we have to analyze is Group D, which has Canada, Cuba, Guatemala, and then an undecided fourth team as well.
I'll go Canada, since that was the first thing that just kind of popped to my mind. I see this Canada side similar to the USA approach. Obviously, when you look at their squad, they sent their stars home, essentially. Talking about like Alphonso Davies, Tejan Buchanan, Kyle Larin, even though, you know, a star might be a little
Jonathan
bit
David.
of a... Jonathan David, absolutely. But then you still have, you know, some A-team starters. I think Eustaquio's still here. Kennedy, who started in the Nations League Finals, is still here. Milan Borjan also still here as well. So there's still some A-team players, but for the majority, when it comes to like who their actual game changers are, they're not here. So this is going to be a completely different Canada side, especially since their A-team is so top heavy. And with that top heaviness gone, this team's going to be completely different, even if you have Eustaquio starting. So I'm really curious to see what they look like, because even 2 years ago, Tejan Buchanan was at least still here. They had a little bit of offensive impetus and like kind of like youthfulness that you could field. You don't really have that anymore for this Gold Cup for Canada. So I'm kind of just curious to see how Herdman's going to approach this, especially after low-key disappointing against the USA. Like, he's got to be a little frustrated. Just the way that game went, especially considering how he sees his own team. And honestly, I think how Canadians and people who watch CONCACAF see Canada. Like, I wanted a more competitive game against the USA. Canada ultimately did not give us that. Therefore, it's showing me that they have a lot to work on. Not obviously nowhere near as dire as Mexico, but if Canada wants to see themselves as good as the USA or even close to it, there's a lot of gaps that they're going to have to fill. Not starting their A-team in this Gold Cup, I don't think it's really going to help. This is the situation where I think it's actually bad that you don't have your A-team. Now, yes, you still get the benefits of Davies gets to go back, have a full preseason with Bayern Munich, right? I think that is a benefit. But when Canada's ultimately not achieving the goals that they want to, I think overall it does more bad than good. Can they still make a deep run? Absolutely. Just because I think Canada overall, similar to the U.S., has very good MLS-based players, and their starting 18 players that are still here are, you know, they're studs. So I can see Canada being very successful in this Gold Cup, but I'm just kind of confused as to what they expect to get out of this, considering their shortcomings.
Yeah, Canada to me is one of the most interesting teams in this tournament because defensively and in the midfield, they're fielding their A-team. From what I saw, they have damn near the exact same players that started in that final playing in their defensive line and their midfield line, where they're just completely rolling the dice is up front. And the thing is, because they're so top-heavy and because we know Jonathan David, we know the quality of Kyle Larin, Alphonso Davies, his ability to get up and attack, Tejan Buchanan, we know these players. What do the rest of them look like? Yeah. I'm so curious because even with the USA, they're fielding Jordan Morris. We know who he is. We know what he can do. Jesus Ferreira, Cade Cowell. We've seen these guys before. We know what they're capable of. But with Canada, I'm so interested to see what they have to offer offensively outside of those players that in their respective leagues are absolutely killing it and deserve to be starting for them. So I think it's an interesting risk that's being taken. I'm not saying it's going to work out, but we might see some surprises, what I'm saying, or at least I'm open to seeing what Canada can do because the rest of the team does look to be up to par. Will we see a squad that is really good defensively and very solid in their shape, but ultimately can't crack the seal, can't generate that goal that they need to make it through into the deeper stages? Or, you know, it might be something interesting to see because in the final, I thought that was their biggest issue, was their ability to finish. Will one of these Canadians just get hot, bro? And we'll just find a way to find the back of the net, something they weren't able to do in that final, and just kind of make a name for themselves. I think John Herdman's intention here is to find some offensive talent outside of the players that they've gone to for the past 4 years and see if he can just kind of rely on one of these guys to maybe rotate out when one of their go-to guys in their starting lineup isn't doing it for them. And ultimately, that might be better for them in the long run. But all in all, I still think this is a team that can reach semis. I still think this is a team that's going to top or maybe come in second in their group. And I still see some positive coming out of it for them in this tournament. Next up, we have Cuba, my friend. Cuba, a team that gained promotion in the Nations League after dominating their group, and that I at one point stated as a top 10 team in CONCACAF. I said that shit. Number 10 or number 9, but they're still up there because their form is incredible, bro. Yeah. This team has completely taken advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to them. I'm not going to lie. I don't know a single one of these players. All I've seen is the results on paper, and the results on paper tell me that this is a team that's on some sort of rise contextually for what they've been able to achieve in this region. I see the Gold Cup as a massive, massive opportunity for them to make a name for themselves. And if you're in a group with a somewhat shaky Canadian side, a Guatemala team that truly hasn't come to fruition the way that I hope they would, Cuba might see this as an opportunity to seize, man. And I have them as a bit of a surprise or maybe even a dark horse in the Gold Cup.
I love Cuba's involvement in the Gold Cup because somehow, some way, they always try to find a way to qualify for this tournament. Now, I'll be honest, in recent past, man, they've been abysmal in this tournament, getting beat 5, 6, 7-0. But to kind of go off of what you're saying, this is definitely their best run of form that I've ever seen a Cuban side ever have. And I think it actually starts with, 5, 6 of their players playing in Central America. I think that does a lot for this island side. And not just playing, but like starring for these Central American sides. I think namely they have a lot of players playing in Costa Rica. That helps, especially when you consider Costa Rica probably being the best Central American league when it comes to domestic football. So I think that's really improving this Cuban side from a competitive standpoint. But yeah, their Nations League run of form has been excellent, gaining promotion to League A. But beyond that, I love their preparation for this tournament, man. They got 2 friendlies against Chile and Uruguay to prepare for this tournament. And, whether they lose or not, I think they lost 3-0 against Chile. It's still like really good competition that'll get you ready for a game against Guatemala, for example. That'll get you more than prepared. So yeah, I've never seen a Cuban side be this serious about a Gold Cup. So this is something I've never seen before. Top 10 team in CONCACAF? Fuck it. Like, I want to see them succeed, but I do think they're going to have a little bit of trouble against, I would say, an equally good side in Guatemala.
I'm wearing their jersey. And it's very comfy, dude. It's very comfortable, and I do feel good about myself in this shirt, man.
Yeah,
it's very nice. But Guatemala has been on their own bit of a rise recently. I believe knocking out Mexico at the younger levels to qualify to the U20 World Cup. They beat CONCACAF's best team at the time in a penalty shootout, made it to the U20 World Cup. And I remember when I was shooting content for Cabra, I looked through the U20 World Cup and I made my predictions. And I said this about Guatemala, and I think it transcends to the professional level. I said that despite the magic behind this Guatemalteco side, I think it's going to fall short in a tournament setting. I think what they're doing is very good. I think it's been very impressive, especially even qualifying for the Gold Cup itself. It's not often that we see Guatemala here. But I think that's where it ends, man. I think that's where the magic ends. Just like it did in the World Cup. They had an abysmal U20 World Cup, ending, I believe, in 3rd or 4th place. I think I see the same thing for them in this Gold Cup, and I hope I'm not disrespecting my Guatemalans wearing their shirt and saying that. But I think when it comes to a Canadian side that is clearly better than them and a Cuban side that I just think is on has a little bit more momentum behind them. It's a little bit smarter about the moves they're making and is trying to do something in this tournament. I think they're going to get defeated. So for me, ultimately, I have Canada in 1st, Cuba in 2nd, Guatemala in 3rd or 4th.
That's the problem, though, when it comes to like these tier 3, tier 4 teams. And I'm going to put Cuba in that same category as Guatemala. The problem is, once you get here, once you go to the United States and you play on these pristine pitches and you play against competition like a Canada side, or let's just say a Panama, Costa Rica, it's so different than just playing in a Nations League setting. Even if you go out on the road or you get to host them in Cuba or in Guatemala, there's something different about the Gold Cup for these smaller teams, to the point where I think it affects their performances to actually play good football, man. And whether that happens in Guatemala or Cuba, just wouldn't be surprised if all of Cuba's form or Guatemala's goes out the window in this tournament, man. I just wouldn't be surprised, because I have seen it every single
ID, bro.
gold. Yeah, exactly. Like ID, there was one year where they looked so good, and then 2 years later, after Copa America, they were terrible. Yeah. But that's just how it is for these bottom half of CONCACAF teams, man. It's so hard to gain consistency. But you know what? You know what's interesting is the Nations League was set in place to stop this, essentially. It was to get teams like Cuba specifically competitive matches on a more consistent basis. So if we see Cuba get out of this group, you could immediately say, oh, well, this is all the doing of CONCACAF Nations League. Giving Cuba 6 competitive games over the course of like a year and a half, they've never had that before. And if they were able to actually utilize that and get out of this group, which I do think is possible, it would be the perfect example of the Nations League actually working. So maybe we see just a turn of the tide a bit for these lower CONCACAF teams, like actually just being as consistent as they are in their non-Gold Cup games. That'd be dope. Now, who do I see getting out? I have Canada topping the group. And, dude, I truly do see Cuba and Guatemala as almost equal.
Yeah.
If I had to pick a team, oh, fuck. I want to see Cuba go through. I'm going to choose Guatemala as my pick, though.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Let me just take this shit off.
Fuck me, huh?
Yeah, fuck me, man. I'm wearing the wrong fucking jersey. But at the end of the day, I think it's so dope that one of those teams, most likely, depending who that 4th team is. Nah, fuck it. Fuck the 4th team.
That's tough for the 4 teams.
One of these,
that's tier 5.
One of these 2 teams, Cuba or Guatemala, is going to make it out, man. And so we'll get to see them in a knockout setting against maybe a top CONCACAF team. And who knows, bro? Who knows? I just want to see a competitive match and a really good performance and showing from one of these 2 sides. I don't care who it is. I think it's fair to say that the top 4 contenders for this tournament are Jamaica, USA, Mexico, and Canada.
Yeah, I agree.
You agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you believe the winner of this tournament will come out of those 4?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The winner of this tournament will be one of those 4. Right. So my prediction.
We could do, we could look at knockout setting matches. We could look at semifinal matches. But at the end of the day, I think I should just ask this question straight up. Who do you have winning the Gold Cup out of those 4 teams that we nominated as contenders?
This gets tricky because this completely depends on how good Jamaica actually is. There is no proof on how good this Jamaican team is. They've never really played together. Obviously, you still have good players like Daniel Johnson, who's always been called up and he always receives that call. But putting them all together, we've just never seen it, especially under this Icelandic coach, Hallgrímsson. My overall take is truly going to depend on how good this Jamaican side is, because if they live up to their hype on paper, I have them getting to the final. But I do see Mexico just still as a true title contender. If Lozano can figure out just how to really utilize Martin's effectiveness or Santi Jimenez, get Luis Chavez, maybe Romo firing on all cylinders. And, Mexico's defense, as they showed against Panama, it can shut out teams that are weaker than them, right? And most of the squads here are going to be weaker than Mexico. So I have Mexico having a really good chance here over Canada for sure. Now, between the USA and Mexico having a genuine opportunity, this gets really tricky because the USA proved to me that they can do it. They can pretty much beat anybody, whether it's through grinding or just actually utilizing their actual offensive talent through Jordan Morris, Jesus Ferreira. They have it. They have the ability to win it. Mexico, too. If Lozano can get Santi Jimenez, Henry Martin, Luis Chavez, maybe Romo, Rodriguez, firing on all cylinders, and they have the backline to prove, as they proved against Panama, they can shut out any team that's below them. Mexico could win it too. And if I had to pick one singular winner, I think the only thing that would make sense to me would actually be Jamaica, simply because of what's on paper. But if I go off of true team chemistry, then it can't be Jamaica. it would have to be either the USA or Mexico. And considering how poor Mexico has been, if the USA play Mexico in the final, if that's even possible, I'd still have the USA winning. So if I go off of what has been and what has been consistent in the last, let's say, 5-6 years, USA is my title winner. If I go off of what could be based off of pure potential, I think Jamaica could also be the title winner. But I actually don't have Mexico or Canada winning this tournament.
The 4 contenders are Jamaica, USA, Mexico, Canada. Here's the problem with each one of them. Jamaica relies on them finding chemistry in that first game. Bro, they could end up being the Jamaica of old within 30 minutes of that first match, and immediately any prediction, any hope you have for this team could go out the window. That's their problem. Mexico could continue being the Mexico that we've been seeing for the past 12 months. So much is reliant on Jaime Lozano figuring it out. What if he just feels the same old squad, man? The hope for Mexico is that they find some sort of momentum that can figure things out during the group stage and then thrive. So there's still a potential for them to mess up and make a mistake. Yeah. That's their problem. The USA, their problem is just that they didn't bring the best players that they have available to them. And thus, they don't have a team that has played together for a long time. They don't have a team that has chemistry. They have talent, but they don't have a connection that they can take advantage of right off the bat. And lastly, Canada, bro. Canada, who at their best fell short to the USA in the final and still weren't able to find the back of the net in very important moments. I think this Canadian team is a lesser version of what they had in that final. That's their issue. So what am I left to do? I don't have a team to pick, bro. I don't. Not a single one of these teams is convincing in that sense. Not a single one of these teams is saying right off the bat that they want the tournament, that they want to be named champions. I don't have a fucking pick. I feel that from a Reynoso perspective, it'd be obvious. It'd be predictable to go for Mexico. It'd be tough for me to say USA simply because they're my rivals. Jamaica is a risky pick. They could maybe not even make it out of the group and I look terrible. And Canada is fucking Canada, bro. So at the end of the day, if I have to pick one team, bro, I think the team that has the smallest margin of error available to them is actually the USA.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think despite the heights that this Jamaican team could reach, I'm just worried, bro. I'm worried that when that first game comes, they struggle to win. They get a draw. They show to be the same Jamaican side that we've seen for so long, just with better individual talent. I'll go USA on this one, man. I'm going USA on this one. And my secondary pick is going to be Mexico, only under the fact that if they are able to reach and develop some sort of chemistry and some sort of newfound ability that we haven't seen from them, only if they're able to do that will I consider them as actual contenders. But if they continue playing the way that they have for the past 12 months, I don't see them lifting the trophy. I have USA winning this tournament and Mexico if they are able to find form.
Very similar takes for me. Again, for me, what it comes down to for the USA is, you know, it's MLS against Liga MX essentially. And I think it's so tight. But the USA just has that edge because their youth just has proven to be always a little bit better. So if I pit those two teams against each other, I have the USA winning right now, man. I really do. As I said before, though, I wonder what Jamaica's gonna do.
Yeah,
I just really do wonder. But I think we both agree basically on USA being the most solid or the most consistent out of the 4.
Yeah.